Okay. See that lady that said, who is that lady that says that? So welcome nonprofit leaders. And if you're here, and I can see a couple of you are, please add a comment so I know who's here. And now I'm going to turn the sound off over here. Just a second. Yeah, see? Please add a comment so I know who's here. Just a second. I gotta turn. There we go. See all these little details. Okay. I'm Nancy Manning, founder of Powering Mission Austin Nonprofit Meetup. Our guest today is Darla Marburger. Am I saying your name right, Darla?
Darla Marburger, yes, ma'am.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your consultancy, Greater for Good?
Sure, Nancy. And first, I just want to say thank you so much for what you do and for inviting me to be a part of today. I really appreciate the experts, resources, and just vital information that you provide the nonprofit community. And I'm grateful for this focus on evaluation this month and also for being able to be a part of that conversation because I'm very passionate about it. I think it's important. I come from, like all of us, we come from a really interesting background that sometimes we never would have envisioned for ourselves, but we're glad we're here. And I come from a family that really was focused on serving. My dad was in the military for 24 years. And when he retired out in Bastrop County, he got involved with the local fire department and volunteer fire department. He was an election judge. I mean, he was a great example to me and my mom also of serving in the community. And so I grew up with that. And that's just that's my comfort spot is giving, contributing, giving for the greater good. And so after I finished earning a bachelor's and master's at Texas A&M University, I started my career in public service. I went to work for the Texas legislature doing agricultural policy and then education policy. And really, I loved that work. I loved it because I felt like what I was doing mattered. And after spending some time in the legislature, I then went on to Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C., they have really big titles if you're working in government. Okay, that's just kind of a given. So I went to Washington, D.C. and became the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education at the U.S. Department of Education. That's a mouthful.
Impressive, impressive.
Yes, but it was a wonderful experience. I led a small policy team in really improving academic achievement with a focus on accountability. And the work that my team did earned us a trip to the White House, a congratulatory trip to the White House. And in that role, I also oversaw 15 different grant programs that awarded $20 billion annually. So I know a little bit about, from the funder's perspective, the importance of reporting impact, right? Being able to evaluate your programs and say, hey, here's the difference that we're making. Well, I had based my career all on the public sector, and I thought it would be good to get some private sector experience as well. And so I went from there actually into corporate consulting and began working for a global analytics company. And my role there, I really helped organizations, and most of them were nonprofit and public sector, but I did some commercial as well. I helped them be able to really garner their data assets, create a strategic plan around how they would use their data to improve their operations, to improve their performance. And I enjoyed that work. I learned a lot about the data do's and don'ts in doing that. But this was corporate work, right? So what's the focus? The focus isn't on how much good are we doing in the world. It's on what's the bottom line? How much profit are we making? And that's important, but it didn't make my heart sing. And I like doing things that make my heart sing. And the other part with that too was, while, as I mentioned, many of my customers were from the public sector, nonprofit world, I was limited on who I could work with. If they weren't really large, I was not given approval to be able to work with them. And I was serving and currently do serve on the board of a small nonprofit and saw how much benefit the experience I had from the business world could help the nonprofits who oftentimes don't have those tools and experience to help them in their organizations. So when I returned from DC to Texas, I decided to start Greater for Good. And Greater for Good is a consultancy focused on helping public sector and nonprofit organizations leverage their data so that they can make a greater impact. Basically, help them be more effective at what it is they want to do. And then be able to tell about that impact in a quantifiable and iconic way, something that I call impact revelation. And that's really a whole other conversation to talk about.
So listen, there's a quote on your website that I want to read to people who are here. Your quote says, while many mission-driven organizations are accustomed to providing data to meet reporting requirements, they often fail to harness the power of data to improve their programming, fine-tune their operations, and reveal their collective organizational impact. Now, last week, Amy Coleman told us that nonprofits often treat data as an afterthought. This quote on your website reminds us of the power of data. So how can nonprofits harness that power?
It's a great question. And Benny did a great job last week too. And I would say that that is something that, data being an afterthought or not harnessing data is not something that only nonprofits are guilty of. It's all types of organizations. I mean, I was in large corporations that were guilty of the same thing. So when it comes to really harnessing the power of the data, I think there are a few things to keep in mind. One, data is an asset. It's an asset just like your best staff, the funds that you receive from your donors. It is an asset that is to be leveraged. And so you don't want to ignore or not tap into the assets and benefits that you have, right? You want to tap into that asset and make the most of it. Number two, data is often something that is neglected or misunderstood. People are like, I just don't feel comfortable with it. I don't have confidence in how to use it. That's okay. It doesn't have to be. There are some very basic things you can do with data that can be very insightful. And it really starts with point number 3, which is questions are the accelerator. Okay, they're the accelerator to getting power from data. You start by figuring out what kind of data you want. You start by asking questions. And you learn more through asking questions. You're able to discover the true power of data when you take a look and you say, hey, why does that say that? What does that really mean? And then you dig deeper into that. So question the data. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. If you see data that doesn't look quite right, that's not a bad thing. That's something that actually is informing you. It's helping you to better understand your organization and what's going on and get to where you want to be. And I would say the fourth item related to that as well is that data is something that needs to be shared. Having it, some people in an organization, they're like, well, this is my program, it's my data. No, that's not true at all. Okay. Data is something that is meant to be shared across an organization, and particularly with nonprofits. It's something that needs to be shared with your community, the people that are investing their time and their financial resources in the work that you're doing. And so internally it needs to be shared so that you can run better and do what you do better. Externally it needs to be shared so that you can continue to garner the support you need to do what you do and possibly even expand that impact that you're having. So those are 4, I think, main principles that can help organizations harness the power of their data, remembering that it's under leveraged, remembering that it is something that can be easily understood. A little bit goes a long way, and that questions are your friend, and that it's meant to be shared. It's not something that's just part of one organization, one part of the organization.
So when I think of what data do we need to be even identifying and getting and managing, oftentimes I think we look maybe only at programs, but that is a big issue. How are we showing our impact? How do we even know we're making an impact? You said something at the beginning. I almost wanted to ask a question in there about how do you even start with figuring out a measuring tool? How do you know how to even do this?
Well, I think the very, very basic part of this is actually in determining it is what is it that you need to know to be able to do your work? What are the questions that you need to be able to answer? It really is as simple as that to start off with. Some people make the mistake when it comes to data to thinking about what data do we have and what can we learn from it. That is a big mistake because you're limiting yourself to what the data is meant to fuel you, not to limit you. Okay. And so it's all about learning how to use that. So you start with saying, all right, perhaps I'm going to start this new program on, I'm going to use a library. Okay. So like I serve on the board of a nonprofit that funds a library in rural Kenya. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if we're starting a library, what are some things that we need to know so that we know that it's being managed well, we know that it's having an impact, and that we can perhaps maybe even replicate this in other places if it does well, right? So understanding, first of all, what's the mission and objective of that program, okay? And then what do you need to know if you're meeting the mission, and if you're able to expand that good that you're doing.
Some of us don't have that kind of brain. Did you know that?
That's why I'm here, is to help them with that.
See, that's what I was wanting to say is that, okay, so I worked for Travis Audubon and we did some outdoor youth education programs, and I could see how those kids were responding to rolling the native seed into the mud balls and then throwing the mud balls up there, but that's not enough. I mean, I need to know 100 other things about that program, the impact of that program. And I'm not a science person. I'm not a math person. So I think part of the issue is even communicating the need for someone like you to come into organizations and help them know how to even think about this in the first place. Am I right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting. People think they don't know how to do it or they can't do it, but in a simple facilitated conversation with your stakeholders, the folks who are running your programs, the folks who are potentially investing. I mean, I work with my customers to identify who they consider those stakeholders to be. But we bring them together, and through facilitated discussion, we're able to extract. I call it extracting because that really is what it is. You've got those questions in you. It's just a matter of helping to pull those out and then list them in a way, making sure we understand what it is you really want to know. So for example, with the library, if you want to know how many books are in circulation, well, what do you mean by books? Is that do textbooks count? What about reference materials? Or, so just being clear about what is meant about those things.
Oh my goodness.
You list all of those things out. And then once you've listed them out, then the question becomes, where's the data? Do we have the data for this? Do we have the data now to be able to answer these questions? And, hopefully the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. And if the answer is no, then the next question really is, well, how can we reasonably get it? You know, is it feasible for us to get this information? How do we go about doing that? And again, all this needs to happen at the beginning of a program, not after. It should not be the afterthought, right? So if you do it from the beginning, then it's easier, right? Those that are involved in the program, who you may be needing to collect data from, that can be a part of their orientation in the program. And it helps you to get what you need from the get-go, so that you're actively measuring the impact of your program as you go along. You can make adjustments as you need to. You can inform, what was that?
Being adaptive, yes.
Yes, exactly. You can be adaptive. And also you can be more, you have the liberty to better inform when you want to, not when you have to.
You know, we are at 11:15 already, and I thought of about 15 more questions. See, that these things just fly by.
They do.
I think what is so critical about what you said is asking the questions. You know, I was a trial attorney, and we had to know how to ask questions to dig deep. And then storytelling in nonprofits, we have to learn how to ask questions that get to the feeling, to get to the emotion. I mean, asking questions is a critical part of everything we do. My problem with evaluation is what I said is, like, when you said the question about what's a book, I thought, you know, that wouldn't have occurred to me. So this is why I think it's important to have people like you that know how to think of those types of questions that we need to be asking, because not all of us know how to do that. Listen, Darla, I will put her information in the comments when we're all done, her email, her website. I'll do all that. Darla, you're in the group, aren't you?
I am.
Okay, well,
I
you
am
can do that too. You can do that, is go back in, because I really want people to understand the importance of what you said about asking the right questions, starting from the beginning, you know, and reaching out to you for some help. You also need to recognize when you need help. So I'm sorry, it's now 11:17. I get so excited about these topics.
Me too.
So listen, everybody, we have way more on evaluation. We have Sarah and Michelle coming up on Thursday. It's a Ask Me Anything About Evaluation. It's going to be very interactive. Please click on the link in the group to come to that meetup. And then next week, we have another evaluation expert. So thank you so much, Darla. I'm so grateful that you came and shared your wisdom with us. I wish we had time for about an hour of you, but we don't.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. It was my pleasure. And thanks again for what you're doing. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.